All right, good evening, members of council and administration, and also those who are streaming from the comforts of your home. Welcome to our public meeting this evening. I would like to go to roll call. All members are present and certainly accounted for. And I'd like to let folks know that we had a closed meeting that was held earlier this evening at 6 p.m. in accordance with section 239(2) C, H, and I of the Municipal Act 2001. It was a meeting or part of the meeting that may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board by Canada, a province or a territory, or a crown agency of any of them. A trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, and labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or an organization. So before I proceed to the disclosure, members of council, I'd like to call upon our Chief Administrative Officer, Margaret Evans, to introduce our new team member on the senior management team. And so I will defer to Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are very pleased to welcome and introduce to you this evening Michelle Bonici, who is our new Director of People and Culture. Here is council, as you've already observed through the last few meetings, but you met Mayor McNamara in person, and I believe Councillor Houston earlier today. The remaining members of council are here on the screen this evening. And Michelle brings to the organization several years of progressive senior leadership in human resources, and we're looking forward to the advice, assistance, direction, leadership that she'll be able to provide to the town of Tecumseh going forward. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Madam CAO, and I certainly want to not only echo the comments that our administrator just brought forward, but I certainly want to take this opportunity, Michelle, to welcome you to, and better known as Team Tecumseh, as all of us, we refer ourselves, and we're very, very pleased to have you on board. So on behalf of all of us, congratulations, and we are certainly looking forward to working hand in glove, as they say, with you and advancing the greater good and the greater cause for our community. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here and be part of the Town of Tecumseh team, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
All right. So with that, we'll to the members, any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented to you this evening? All right, none indicated. We'll have that reflected in minutes of our next meeting. So now we'll go right to the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 27, 2021, and the public council meeting also of July 27, 2021. That was a ZBA 5648 North Talbot Road. So can I have a motion to approve those minutes as they presented to you this evening? Deputy Mayor McKetty and Councillor Jobin. On those minutes, any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The minutes are approved. I believe we do have supplementary agenda adoption requirement, and if I could have a motion on the supplementary. Councillor Altenhoff, move, and Councillor Tony will support. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. All right, it gives me pleasure for our delegation this evening to bring forward our Director of Financial Services and our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Tom Kitsos. And it's hard to believe, but getting ready for the 2022 pre-budget consultation on our upcoming budget. Mr. Kitsos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of council. So tonight we consider this the kickoff of the 2022 budget process. So administration will go through this exercise most years. We generally will skip an election year due to the timing of council change, but of course this year we will proceed with our council consultation. So the intent of this exercise is to provide council with a preview of how the upcoming budget is shaping up. It's to allow council an opportunity to provide additional direction to senior management heading into budget development. It's also an invitation to the public to participate in the budget process through council meetings and our online survey. And it also serves as a means to identify items that may factor in the upcoming budget that were not projected in last year's forecast. So at the forefront of our process is our corporate strategic priorities. So they include smart growth, sustainable infrastructure, community health and wellness, continuous improvement, and good governance. Council adopted these strategic priorities for 2019 through 2022 term, and they adopted the document in July of 2019, and administration develops the annual budget with the intent of delivering on those strategic priorities. An annual report for council is prepared by administration that details progress made towards those priorities, noting specific initiatives achieved over the course of the past 12 months. The 2020 report out was presented to council through Council Report CAO 2021-10 at the July 13 regular meeting of council. So we have our budget timelines for 2022 here on the screen. And so we include, we start with the council consultation, which of course occurs tonight. And we include requested budget development, public engagement, requested budget review, proposed budget, deliberations, and all through to adoption. So so typically in a non-election year, we would devise a schedule that will allow an opportunity for council to adopt in December. So which that usually means we would table the proposed budget at the first regular council meeting in November. Due to the pandemic last year, we altered the schedule a little bit last year. However, we intend to return to our usual schedule this year with the proposed budget to be tabled at the November 9 regular council meeting. Council deliberations will follow in the ensuing weeks. Those dates have yet to be established. However, they will be set so that we will have an opportunity to adopt the 2022 budget at the December 14th regular council meeting. Our annual budget survey will be available on our website from September 16 through to October 6, and we encourage property owners to participate in the process. We do like to remind council and the public that due to the nature of our budget survey is not statistically representative of the population. It is intended as an opportunity for Tecumseh taxpayers to provide comment on budget related matters that will be reviewed and considered during the budget development process. So for our 2022 budget approach, of course, the fundamental framework of our budget development is to focus on program and service delivery that work towards achieving our strategic priorities while respecting our taxpayers and ability to pay. Our 2021 budget was prepared and adopted factoring the pandemic within a stage orange, I believe it was, environment at that time. So if you recall, that was one where the majority of services were able to be offered, however, at reduced levels and with restrictions. For 2022, we will develop the budget assuming a return to more normal operations. This means that revenues or fees will be budgeted at normal capacity and that any shortfall due to COVID will ultimately settle as an unfavorable operating variance or deficit. For expenditures, we will include COVID-specific amounts in the budget, such as additional custodian services. However, those specific expenditures will be offset by unused or new grant revenue or a transfer from tax rate stabilization reserve. So they will be reflected as a zero impact to the budget. Ultimately, all COVID-specific financial impacts for 2022 will be offset by either available COVID grant funding or tax rate stabilization reserve. For the MPAC reassessment cycle, so this was planned for the 2021 was planned to occur in 2020 and was to impact the 2021 through 2024 tax years. It has been postponed again. So property valuations for 2022 will be equivalent to that of 2020, which means municipal assessment bases will only increase for actual assessment growth. So this means that the municipal levy increase will be quite close to the tax rate increase, which is not normally the case when market valuation assessment growth is phased in each year. So that generally isn't an issue for us. We deliver our budget message with respect to the levy increase. So the dollar impacts net of growth, as that is what our typical homeowner will actually experience on their tax bill. The municipal levy increase net of growth is essentially quite close to what an actual homeowner will experience, whereas the tax rate increase is not typically indicative of what the homeowner will experience. So on this slide, we show our 2021 approved budget and where we had forecasted what we might expect in 2022 through 2025. So when preparing our annual budget, departments also consider what the outlook years may look like. So last year, our municipal levy net of growth came in at 2.79%. And with the no phased in market valuation, our tax rate actually increased by 2.46%. So quite close to the actual assessment or levy increase net of growth. So at that time, we projected that the 2022 levy would likely call for a municipal levy increase net of growth of about 2.40%, reflected there in the gray at the bottom. So it is noted that we had anticipated a fairly equal increase to operating capital budgets at that time, forecasting an increase equal to 2% of the municipal levy for operating, 1.6% for life cycle or capital, and those offset by assessment growth of around 1.2% to get to our 2.4%. So here's where we include a summary of budget pressures and drivers for 2022 as we see them at this point in time. So we've summarized our projections for 2022 from last year and compare that to what we have come up with during this year's preliminary budget exercise. So the 2022 preliminary estimate is quite a bit greater than what was projected last year. So we had projected an increase of 2.40% for 2022 at this time, last year. However, at this preliminary stage, we anticipate an increase of 3.55%. So the biggest impact to the 2022 budget is recommendations or the recommended implementation plan of our recently completed organizational review. So the organizational review was identified in the 2021 budget process as an item that could impact future budgets. However, the impact could not be estimated at that time and was left as an unknown. So the 2.4% projection from last year was in the absence of consideration of any financial impact of the review, and therefore was quite likely to be understated. However, of course, we could not know at that time. Recommendations from the org review place the greatest strain on our operations budget. A funding strategy recommended in the 2022 pre-budget exercise is to offset the impact of the org review recommendations by way of limiting our capital life cycle budget increases. This is reflected in the $300,000 difference between life cycle capital projected amount from $400,000 in the above table to $100,000 in the below table. It is anticipated that this funding limitation to our capital budgets will be temporary and that a return to more normal increase can be achieved for 2023 with the benefit of assessment growth. Assessment growth, as you'll note, is another source of budget pressure for 2022. So although there is relatively strong development activity ongoing, assessment growth to some extent has yet to reach the municipality's tax roll. So this contributes an additional $100,000 in financial pressure. You see the assessment growth reducing from $300,000 to an expected $200,000. So details for revenue and expenditure drivers follow in the next slides. So for our operating revenues, we have assessment growth estimated $200,000 as previously mentioned. So current year to date in-year assessment growth is around $90,000. So that is quite low. However, we do think that 200,000 is still attainable for the upcoming year. A significant hit to our 2022 revenue budget is the change to the former provincial policing grant, where we would have received approximately $94,000 to offset our operating costs. So program funds of the 1,000 officer grant and the community policing partnership grant have been redirected to the community safety and policing grant program. So this funding is program specific, geared towards two initiatives that are administered regionally through the Kingsville detachment. As the funds are now program specific and the programs are regionally administered, we will see neither the expenditures for this initiative nor the grant revenue. The total operating revenue line item identified is $124,000 for a reduction to the municipal levy of about 0.5%. So on the expenditure side, so recommendations coming from the organization review include staffing enhancements with an operating impact to the programs funded through the general tax levy of approximately $340,000. The implementation of the recommendations is recommended to be phased in over the course of a few years. However, the bulk of the financial impact would occur in the first year. $300,000 of this increase is proposed to be offset by temporarily reducing our life cycle capital allocation increases for 2022. The balance will be offset by accessing our life cycle strategic issues one-time reserve. This funding strategy eliminates the financial impact of the tax levy in 2022. The expectation is that slow to arrive assessment growth will compensate for the operating impact in 2023 onward. QB bargaining occurred during 2021 for our three biggest bargaining units that had expired at the end of 2020. So that helps to identify the contractual and negotiated increases for both union and non-union staff. And we estimate that to be approximately $200,000 or 0.8% to next year's tax levy. Note that we include an estimated increase to the benefits portion of this amount, as those 2022 rates are yet to be determined. The town commenced implementation of the HR service delivery review in 2021, with the remainder included for 2022, and that is reflected on that third line of $132,000. Professional development and education amounts, so those are essentially the reversal of one-time savings we had budgeted for 2021 to help offset the impact of COVID-21 and our attempt to find temporary cost savings. So now we would return the large majority of that back to our regular base budget. Policing contract is budgeted to increase. So this amount accounts for our 2019 and 2020 reconciliations where we incurred deficits. The $70,000 is also intended to cover those prior year budgetary shortfalls and includes a modest inflationary provision for 2022. The town will also assume the Maidstone recreational facility in 2022. We have included a rough estimate of basic operating costs at this time at $40,000. We anticipate another increase to insurance costs. So this will be, I think, the third year now running where the industry in general has seen increasing rates across the board. Early indicators suggest that 2022 will continue that trend. We've seen some neighbors seeing tenders coming in at 10 to 15% increases. So we have factored for a relatively large increase, and that is partly offset through our insurance reserve to reduce that impact a bit. Garbage and collection disposal represents a significant amount of our operating budget and is subject to contractual inflationary increases. So we've included an amount estimated for next year. We were able to recognize a reduction to the operating budget through the reversal of a one-time CIP grant increase implemented for 2021. So that helps us by $75,000. And the balance of $102,000 includes anticipated inflationary pressure for some major expenditure line items such as contract services, maintenance materials, and supplies, which are typically subject to inflationary increases. So the total operating expenditure items identified amounts to $915,000, or an increase of 3.64% to the municipal levy, and is clearly the most significant budget driver for 2022. So on this slide here, we've identified some COVID-19 grant revenues. And so these are grant revenues that are available to us for 2021. So that includes SRA Phase 2, Municipal Phase 2 funding, SRA or 2021 COVID-19 recovery funding, and SRA Transit Phase 3 funding. So although the budget will be developed assuming normal conditions, we will likely experience financial pressures through 2021 and into 2022. So in 2021, we did build the budget and trying to anticipate what a reduced capacity revenue might look like. For 2022, as mentioned earlier, we'll budget for normal conditions, knowing that any COVID-related impact will result in a deficit, which will fund through grants or reserves. So we identify these grants above as many of them have provisions that allow for carry forward of unused funds. So it is possible that we may not require all of the $704,000 for 2021, and we might be able to carry forward some. There may also be additional grant programs offered by senior levels of government. Yep, next slide, please. Okay, so for specific COVID-specific expenditures, we've detailed some specific line items here, so including vaccination, passport check, custodian, parks, buildings, additional cleaning, and safety protocol items. It is anticipated that grant funding and or reserves will offset those increases, so the net impact will be zero to the tax rate. So ultimately, we're budgeting for normal operations and expect that any COVID-related financial impacts will be offset by grants or reserves. And so on this slide, that should be 2022 operating drivers not yet quantified. So there are some items that we've identified here. So we have our collecting bargaining unit 702.13 and firefighters association. Those agreements expire at the end of 2021. So those will be negotiated. There's also a non-union compensation review that's ongoing and is expected to be completed in Q4 2021. And that may have budgetary implications for 2022. And as always, we always include the education and county levies. So of course we have, they will impact what taxpayers will pay on their property tax bill. And of course, we have no insight as to those increases at this time. So now we have our pressures for life cycle and capital. So typically the last several years, the driving force for our levies has been a life cycle capital. So we have built some strong life cycle and capital programs. And our current base allocation to the new infrastructure levy is 1.75 million with a target of 2.35 million. So at the 2021 budget, we anticipate increasing this allocation approximately 200,000 per year until reaching our target. However, as mentioned earlier, the funding strategy recommended for our organizational review implementation is to temporarily suspend an allocation increase for the nil for 2022. So we would see no increase there and it would remain at 1.75 million. During the 2021 budget process, we did a review of life cycle allocations and identified several categories that require increased funding. Overall, our annual funding shortfall was calculated at about 1.2 million, with the bulk of that for our storm life cycle reserve. As part of the organization review implementation strategy, funding strategy, the life cycle allocation increase is recommended to be limited to a $100,000 increase for 2022, and annual increases of returning to annual allocation increases of around 200,000 per year likely to be expected going forward. And as a point of reference, our current allocation is around is over $8 million. So 200,000 represents an annual increase of about 2%. So for our outlook years, which is 2023 and 2024, so we've included assessment growth of 200,000 per year, which is, I would say, fairly conservative. Our average assessment growth for the 5 years, 2016 through 2020, was 250,000. However, as mentioned earlier, some of the assessment gains to our tax roll has been kind of slow in getting there. So we've tempered our estimations, our projections at this stage. Organizational review implementation strategy continues through 2023 and culminating in 2024 with financial impact to operating budget of around 170,000 in 2023 and 175,000 in 2024. And we also identified the lottery licensing claim. So this is still ongoing and the outcome is unknown. Now, so for this slide, we have our outlook years for life cycle capital. So in the past years, this would have been the focus of our budget discussions, primarily the last several years. And that is significant capital projects and identification of funding sources and priorities. Those significant projects are still in play with all of the major projects advancing in some fashion. Ongoing discussion and prioritization strategies will be considered through the budget process and will be reflected in the department 5-year capital plans that typically will be brought forward to council in December and January. For our outlook years, we have included a general placeholder for our life cycle categories of 200,000 per year. This represents, as mentioned earlier, around a 2% annual increase to those reserves. That may not be sufficient to cover inflationary pressures. We have OSIF grant here listed again, so it was confirmed for 2021. However, we have yet to hear the province's intentions for 2022. This is a significant source of funding that we have hoped to help out our storm life cycle category. The continuation of annual increases to our new infrastructure levy is shown with a partial reduction for 2023 to offset some of the organizational review financial impact. And below that, we have some of the big capital project demands that would be expected to be funded at least partly through our infrastructure reserve, which is funded through the new infrastructure levy, and their amounts are either partly captured or not captured in our nil target. So those include Sportsplex with our annual target of 2.35 million. Our allocation is 550,000 that is intended to fund Sportsplex related debt servicing costs. So this amount can support approximately $10 million in debt over a 20-year repayment term. CIP infrastructure, so we've identified this in the past, so costs are estimated over 30 million and are partly included in life cycle categories. However, enhancement amounts are funded from the infrastructure reserve. Storm drainage master plans we've listed here. So we have one done and another soon to be completed. Our annual 2.35 million target was established prior to the completion of these projects. So they include significant enhancements that should be funded from the new infrastructure levy. We have identified though that we have some costs, anticipated costs for 2023 and 2024 for our storm pump station projects due to commence construction in 2023 and into 2024. And we will get some financial relief through the DMAF grant, which will fund up to 40% of project costs. And then we've also identified development front-end financing. So although we would recover these costs, they would put pressure on our finances and corporate debt. So in this slide, this typically just reminds council of our capital budget process. So we have our life cycle funding model, which has been very successful over the past several years and is predominantly used to fund asset replacement. And our new infrastructure levy was established in 2015 to address a void in our life cycle program, and that being the capital funding source for new or enhanced assets. Our current allocation is 1.75 million, and we have a target annual allocation of 2.35 million. New infrastructure levy funds are credited to our infrastructure reserve, which is our funding source for new assets, enhanced assets, and to some extent development front-end financing. Recommendations for annual project allocations follow the budget process and are brought forward to council for consideration and approval through department 5-year capital plans. Okay, so in this, now we turn to our rate supported program. So that's water and wastewater or sanitary. So our water and wastewater rates are based on the town's water and wastewater rate study. So our latest study was completed in 2015. So this was due to be updated in 2020. However, due to COVID, was postponed to 2021. So the study update is currently being produced in-house, and we do hope to have it at least to the extent that we can use projections for use in the 2022 budget process. That said, for this purpose tonight, we include the 2015 study recommendations to estimate the 2022 rates. So we consider this a reasonable approach, as our 2015 study was projected over a 10-year period. So the goal of the 2015 study, and which will also continue to be our goal for 2020, for the 2021 update, will be to gradually shift our revenue mix to about 60% variable, 40% fixed, from the 70% variable, 30% fixed at 2015. So to do this, there's a greater increase on the fixed rate charges of around 6% annually, and variable rate charges increase from either 1 to 3% for water and wastewater respectively. So this will address a negative impact to our reserve funds due to a trend of declining consumption rates, and will help to address our deficit position. However, I say a deficit position, so we have recently got into the black as far as our sanitary reserve fund is concerned. So it's no longer in a deficit, which is good. So we've identified some water and wastewater drivers. So these have not changed from last year. So we have most notably identified as a possibility of front-ending financing development infrastructure. Again, these costs would be recoverable, however, would impact cash and debt positions. Some other drivers identified are similar to the years past, as I've mentioned. So there's continuation of our water main replacement program, continuation of our cathodic protection program. And we've had here the addition of a property study and design for Old Castle Hamlet water tower and booster station to improve water pressure in the south end. So although this is still a possibility, there has been recent development in the city of Windsor where they are considering construction of a tower on their lands adjacent to where we would consider putting a tower. So that is something that there may be an opportunity to partner with the city, which would be positive for both municipalities. On the wastewater side, we include the completion of our sanitary sewer model update, continuation of sanitary servicing in North Talbot and 8th concession areas, and wastewater debt servicing costs are listed. So the bulk of wastewater debt servicing costs will expire in 2022, which will be a boost to our reserve fund balances. So on this slide, we show the comparative water and wastewater rates in our region. And so this is a good comparison. This is one of those comparisons that is, I guess, as fair as the services are quite similar for each municipality. And you see the town is positioned towards the lower end of the scale here within the county. And on this slide, so we always like to show the 2021 comparative Essex County combined tax water sanitary burden comparison. So again, here, this compares property tax and water wastewater burden. The assumptions are for a house valued at $250,000 with 20 cubic meters of water consumption per month, which is what we typically experience. This is not as good a comparison as the previous rates comparison. However, it is still a useful comparison. Again, the town sits at the lower end of the scale here with combined tax rate burden in the county, sitting at the second lowest combined. And finally, we like to provide council with a a view or a snapshot of our primary reserves. So we have identified three just here. So we have the tax rate stabilization reserve. So this is an important one, particularly in times like now where we have things such as COVID or threat of inland flooding was an item last year. So this is a reserve that we would go to fund those sorts of one-time costs. Best practice is to have a tax rate stabilization reserve of about 10 to 15% of our annual levy. So that translates to about 3.765 million for us. At 2020 year end, we were at 2.653 million. And that's we dropped a bit, and that's mainly due to our funding strategy for town hall renovations, where we partially funded this project through this reserve. This balance does not include the recommended transfer of 2020 surplus operating funds, where we recommend an allocation of $516,000. Next major reserve is our infrastructure reserve. This is a reserve that we're building up to help fund new assets and asset enhancements. The 2020 year-end balance was 8.3 million. We don't have a target established for this. However, we have identified several major funding demands for this reserve in previous slides. And then we have our we've referred to it as post-retirement benefits, but should be post-employment benefits reserve fund. So this, the target is updated through our annual actuarial update. This target will likely continue to grow for some time. As we have some employees retire who would still get that benefit. Retirement or post-employment benefit costs have been increasing, particularly the past 2 years, and we have not yet had to access these funds. So retiree benefits have been paid out of our operating budgets to date. And that ends the presentation. If there are any questions or comments, we would welcome them now.
Okay, questions or comments? Councilor Dowie?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Tom, for the presentation. I just wanted a bit of clarity on you mentioned the storm sewer expansion storm drainage master plan. So that is not a rate supported program. That is totally a tax supported program under the new infrastructure levy.
Through the mayor to council, yes, it is tax supported, fully tax supported at this time. We do have a storm life cycle reserve that we would use to fund replacement of existing assets. The challenge we face with storm in particular is that what we're finding is the replacements are improving capacity. So we're getting better service through that, but the costs are much greater than what the life cycle allocations would typically be able to fund. So that's where we access our infrastructure reserve, and that's where we would rely on some component of the new infrastructure levy to help participate in that. We were beneficiaries of the DMAF grant, which is a big help. So, but those costs are quite significant. The recommended projects going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I should also mention that the town is investigating a stormwater rate study. So that has recently been completed by our consultant, and we should see the final product for council, I would say in the last quarter of this year. So that is a possible alternative funding strategy that will be brought forward to council.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. If I could have a supplementary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So just I'm looking at some of our decisions for this year with the new infrastructure levy that are being recommended. We do have, in addition to the storm master plan and the certainly the sportsplex, the Tecumseh Road project. Is there a risk of overloading that at the current increases? Because I'm just thinking, are we putting away enough to be able to meet everyone's expectations for implementation of these programs? Through
the mayor to council. So while our annual target is 2.35 million, so we're not quite there yet. That annual target is based off of a couple of major studies. So one is our 2019 development charge or study update, and also our 2018 asset management plan. So it is based on studies that we've conducted either in-house or through consultants, and that include the majority of those projects. However, I must say that when those studies were completed, not all of these projects or these the new studies like the storm drainage master plan. So not all of those costs were available, of course, at the time of those studies. So we did update the annual allocation requirement to 2.35 million based on the 2019 development charge update. We're currently in the process of updating our asset management plan, so we'll see some updated figures there. So I would anticipate seeing probably an increase to that annual target. However, we don't. One thing we don't figure in is we don't assume that there would be grant funding. So of course, grant opportunities do exist from time to time, and those would be things that we would pursue that would help offset this. We do get our gas tax grant, so which can be used for some of these categories. So we do have some funding sources, but it is difficult to say whether we're putting away enough. I don't think any municipality could ever put away enough. It's really unrealistic to think that a municipality could fund these projects on its own. So there definitely is some reliance on assistance from senior levels of government.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Dowie. Any further questions or comments? Councilor Jobin.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor, to Tom. Did you say that the reserves has an additional 500,000 coming to it or out of it?
Through the mayor to council, on our report later this evening, you'll see the report on the 2020 year-end report, where we have a rather healthy surplus, and one of the recommendations is to transfer around 516,000 of that 2020 surplus into the tax rate stabilization reserve. So that would put us over 3 million in that reserve.
Okay, thank you.
That's great, because I just did my math over here, and I was going to say that the tax stabilization fund will grow to 3.1 million at the end of the year. So that's good to know, because if I'm not mistaken, also Mr. Kitsos, that that's the area where we took the 500,000 out of when we did the shoreline reinforcement on the flood mitigation under the emergency order that was placed last year.
To the mayor, I think actually we used the infrastructure reserve for the berms. But as tax rate stabilization reserve was an option, but we elected to go with the infrastructure reserve for that works. But access, we typically will access the tax rate stabilization reserve for things that are like one-time fluctuations to the operating budget. So whereas those berms are more capital related, we access the infrastructure reserve. For the tax rate stabilization reserve, we've recently accessed it for flood preparedness exercises such as the sandbags, equipment for sandbags, and we use it quite a bit for one-time studies.
Okay, that's great. The other comments that I'd like to make as well is that it's really evident the benefits of new assessment growth, and we can see we're on the cusp, but it's been a long time coming. And in order for us to remedy a lot of the pressures that are required moving forward, it's new assessment. And I think we need to have a real wholesome discussion with council and certainly administration on getting that house in order. In my opinion, it's been long overdue. We've been talking certain areas for development for the last 10 years or so. So we need to really start being a little bit more aggressive and dealing with that. And it's so unfortunate that we've been such a hot real estate market, and we're missing the boat and that. So I think that's an area I think that needs some real attention, because when I start seeing the pressures that we're faced with in terms of your presentation, Tom, I can see where new assessment go a long way to help us in those and certainly in those areas. And the other area that I think we need to have a real wholesome discussion moving forward, because of really, we've been in a pretty hot real estate market and so forth. We've seen the benefits of what's transpired on Tecumseh Road. Maybe it's time for us now to reevaluate the CIP program and those grants that we've put in place. I think we need to really sit down and start discussing that, because again, when we look at the new assessment piece and then the grants that are being offset for that, and then the time frame, the 5 years that we have, we're being impacted, obviously, and those dollars that are coming forward. I mean, the smaller stuff in terms of, the facade improvements and that stuff, I think that's a good thing to have, moving forward now. But I think the market is telling us and dictating to us, in particular in those corridors, that the demand for that type of housing is there. And so that's something that I would like to see moving forward in that discussion as we talk in the 2022. And how do we sort of wean ourselves from that? And, I understand you can't just cut it off, next Monday. But we need to have, I think, that discussion certainly moving forward, because we've got to kind of rebalance in terms of those pressures that are there. And you're absolutely right, Mr. Kitsos. We can't put everything that's in the pot and say, that we can handle it all as a municipality. We're going to need help, on the continuous, on the federal and certainly the provincial side, to help mitigate some of those pressures that are, especially on the climate change file and the infrastructure file itself. So I really think it's timely now that we look at, the total package, and we need to start reevaluating some of the things that were put in place 3, 4, 5 years ago, and start moving towards in the near future, and making sure that lands that are close, or if they're not close, why they're not close, but what is needed. And I'm still waiting to have that discussion, even with a lot of those landowners. What's the requirements, and what can we do without breaking the bank? Obviously, we have to be considerate of that, but in the same token, what are they prepared to commit as well? Because we're still in a fairly hot market, and I just don't want us to miss the boat. So I think those are all good discussions I think we should have between now and the budget 22. Councillor Alton.
Thank you, Worship. And through you, just one first comment that, I think the last point you raised, call it, if there's any low-hanging fruits, or certainly near opportunities that we can perhaps, engage with our community partners and capitalize on that's something we should look at and explore. A query to administration through you, Your Worship. Tom, do you have any idea? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but can you forecast, or can you oversee, based upon the history, on the horizon, any potential support that could be received from senior levels of government, which could assist?
And through the mayor to council, predicting that is extremely difficult. So what I've seen, grant opportunities go in waves. There's been a whole bunch that's been available, and we've been fortunate to benefit from that in the last year and a half. But we've also seen years where we'll go through a 2 or 3 year drought, where there's really hardly any programs available. and perhaps ones that are available don't really suit our priorities or our objectives. And then there's some that are just, awarded based on application, and for whatever reason, sometimes we just won't be successful. So it really goes in fits and starts. It's very hard to predict. I would say right now we've been fortunate. There's been a lot. My expectation is that it would probably decrease in the upcoming years, just because there has been a fair bit. But yeah, I have no way to predict that one.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Just to try to get a feeling based upon kind of history. All these things are always maybe somewhat helpful to know in the back of your mind, but thank you very much.
I think the partnership at the local level, so it all depends who you elect at the government table. And I can tell you that if the last 18 months proves a point, I think that's something to look at. But you need to be at the banquet table, and I'll leave it at that. And so any further questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Kitso. And maybe before you go there too, for members of council too, and then anything, email to, to Mr. Kitsos, and certainly to our CAO on things that, that you want to see in our discussions as we move forward. Feel free to do that. It's an opportunity, and we're going to obviously offer it to our constituents as well. Mr. Kitsos.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to add that I wanted to send thanks to all the departments, the directors and managers who participate in this exercise. It's not one that anyone ever looks forward to, and it's challenging, especially this time of year. And I especially want to send thanks to Azora, who I see is attending this meeting. So Azora is a huge participant in this process. Thank you.
Mr. Kitsos, we never underestimate budget in the difficulty that it is to bring something forward that is certainly presentable. And over the course of the years, we've always been very fortunate that we've got a real solid group of people at the administrative table that have delivered, our budgets over the course of the years with care and utmost professionalism. So we certainly understand. It's almost like you're presenting something, and to those who will say yay or nay, but in the same token, we're there also as the representative of our taxpayers, and so. But I fully concur with your comments. It's and very appreciative of the hard work that goes into this. It's not something that you do over a week or two. You've been working at this since the beginning of July, and we still got a good 2 months at least of solid work in preparation for it. So we certainly appreciate those efforts. So if no further questions or comments at this stage here, if I get a motion to receive Mr. Kitsos' pre-budget documents, Councillor Houston, Councillor Altenhoff, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And looking forward to our future deliberations. Okay. Communications, members of council, we've got a lot of communications. I believe we've got 43 pieces of communications. If I can have a motion to receive. Councilor Dowie, Councilor Tonio, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Also, members of council, we do have, I believe, communications for action required. And then I'll call upon members of council if there's anything within those 43 items you want to bring out. The first one is on Rail Safety Week, September 20th to 26th. It's an ongoing request from certainly our CN and CP and VIA, the motion to support the Rail Safety Week. Moved by Counselor Dowie and Counselor Houston, support. Any questions or comments?
Hey, Your
Go
worship,
ahead, Counselor Dowie.
I guess, are we missing just on our agenda, the motion, like the where, we have the whereases, but do we have the actual designation as part of this motion? Rail
Yes,
Safety Week?
yes, I can read it. I figured it was all in front, but so it's whereas Rail Safety Week is to be held across Canada from September 20th to 26th, 2021. And whereas it is in the public's interest to raise citizens' awareness of the dangers of ignoring safety warnings at level crossings and trespassing on rail property to reduce avoidable deaths, injuries, and damage caused by incidents involving trains and citizens. Whereas Operation Lifesaver is a public-private partnership whose aim is to work with the public, rail industry, governments, police services, media, and others to raise rail safety awareness. And whereas CN has requested town Tecumseh adopt this resolution in support of its ongoing efforts to raise awareness, save lives, and prevent injuries in communities, including our own here in Tecumseh.
So can I add in, therefore, Tecumseh Town Council does adopt Rail Safety Week for September 20th to 26th as the final part of this?
We can certainly do that.
Okay, there it is. It's okay. I see it there.
Okay. So therefore resolved. Okay, on the motion, I cannot see everybody. Yeah, okay, thank you. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any of that is carried, unanimous. The second item there is from the Local Authority Services, better known as LAS, part of Amo, dated September 9th. It's the Risk Management Symposium. So I need a motion to approve that the mayor and members of council be authorized to register for the LAS Powering Change Climate Resiliency for a Better Tomorrow virtual symposium on October 5th and 6th, 2021, at a cost of $275, subject to funding in the 2021 budget in compliance with the town's travel and professional development policies. Moved by Deputy Mayor Buchetti and Councillor Jobin. On the motion, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. The third is the Amo Policy update, and that was dated August 23rd, and it's draft resolution for municipal recognition of September 30th as National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and a new municipal resources materials. And that consideration be given to recognizing September 30th as a National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, also known as Orange Shirt Day, with the adoption of the Amo resolution contained in the August 23rd, 2021 Amo 23 Amo 2321 Amo communications. Moved by Councilor Tonio, supported Councilor Houston. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you very much. And I'll go back to those communication piece or anything members of council want to bring forward at this stage here. Councilor Dowie, please.
Thank you, Worship. Actually, just for item 31, I definitely want to thank the applicant for giving the notification of the microprocessing cannabis license application, giving us the heads up, and I think that's very nice of them. It's something that certainly our residents will be interested in. Yeah, so just I don't know if they're required to do this, but I'm grateful that they have, because otherwise we just wouldn't know. And I think the residents are all very much interested in knowing of these types of initiatives.
Very good point, Councilor Dowie. It makes for good business practice and building good relationships with obviously our local government. Okay, anything further? Council, yes, Deputy Mayor Buchetti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to acknowledge item 39, the Government Finance Association giving the town recognition for its budget presentation. Again, it's an annual thing that I know Mr. Kitsos is very proud of, and with his predecessor, Mr. Gagno, that they have a well-established budget presentation. So kudos to their team and senior men for that award.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, come on, Mr. Kitsos, you got to blow your horn once in a while. I mean, these awards are North America wide, and certainly the recognition. So congratulations to Tom and Zora, your team, and certainly administration. It takes a a team effort to do it. And as we say, Team Tecumseh comes through again. I think this is Mr. Kitsos have to correct me. This is what, 10 in a row?
I think we're at 11.
There you go.
And thank you, and we are proud of it, and it is definitely a team effort, because we do ask a lot of our directors and managers as well. So thank you to all of them, and of course our CAO for the support.
Wonderful, and job well done. Don't be so shy next time. All right, so we'll move on to, if there's anything further on the communication. If not, then we'll move on to committee minutes. We have the minutes of Town of Tecumseh Business Improvement and Area Board. Moved by Councillor Houston, supported by Councillor Tonio. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Rural Broadband Advisory Committee dated July 14th. A motion to receive those minutes. Moved by Councillor Jobin and supported by Councillor Tonio. Any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Worship. No, you know what, actually, I'm very happy that this came forward through the administration and that we have this initiative going forward. I'm just delighted to keep on reading about it as we go, and looks like it's a very in-depth opportunity to provide better service for our community.
Yeah, very good. And the other thing, I think I did have a meeting with our SWIFT ED today, and then with the province now left, there are RFQ out, and there'll be some news coming out in the delivery of the next tranches of monies from the province. And all I can say is that we're going to be extremely pleased to see what's going to transpire in the County of Essex. So there'll be a lot more to share shortly. So hang on, and for those, be patient. But I think you'll all be extremely pleased with what's coming down the pipe. Okay, so on that, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Reports. Move on to the Chief Administrative Officer, Ms. Evans. If you can give us bring your report forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did canvass the team after we read about the positive news there with the partnering of the County of Essex and the City of Windsor on the WeVax to Win program. And actually, Sean, if you could bring up the attachment to the report. So we kind of canvassed the team to see what we might be able to come up with to contribute, because not only is the city and the county involved, but the University of Windsor, the St. Clair College, Windsor Regional Hospital, and the invitation has been, put out to all to contribute to this goal of trying to reward those who have done the double vaccination for COVID-19 and inspire those who are not yet vaccinated to pursue full vaccination. So on that note, we did come up with a cadre of really quite neat prizes. These would be oriented or focused to the Town of Tecumseh residents who would benefit most from them. A free bus pass for a year with a value of $400 for an adult or $300 for a student. Corporate Services is offering up a free marriage license. Love is in the air. And so there may be some who want to avail themselves of a license for a civil service as well. So the license is valued at 130, the civil service on a weekday at 250 for a price total value of $380 each. We're also looking at free dog tags for the lifetime of a dog as the prize. For those with pets, that certainly has substantial value for them. Fire services, always a hit with families, particularly with young children, offering two prizes, a home safety package with smoke and CO detectors and a kitchen extinguisher, as well as a fire station tour and ride and fire truck for a family of up to 5 people. Public Works, not to be outdone by the others, has come up with a free backwater valve to a maximum value, the valve itself and installation to a maximum value of $1,600. So timely to homeowners that haven't done this yet and feel that they want to get that done in the next little while. And then Parks and Recreation coming in with a $200 gift card for use towards registrations for any program or rental, including ice. So these are what the administration is putting forward for council's favorable consideration this evening as contributions from the town of Tecumseh to the We Vax to Win program, which begins its draws, I believe, October 1st, and then bi-weekly thereafter until all of the prizes are exhausted. And so we're in your hands this evening with this as an offering to that program.
Well, thank you very much for your report. Members of council, any questions or comments? Councillor Houston and Councillor Tonio.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think what we've come up with, are great prizes, right, for those who have, done their, gone through and gotten vaccinated. The only question I had when I look at any of this is if someone were to be awarded the backwater valve or, the bus pass, right? These are transferable or giftable, correct, to, if somebody is awarded and they just put in a backwater valve, right? They could gift this to somebody else, correct?
We didn't put that in the report to the mayor because the contest rules indicate that they're not transferable, but I think we only have half a dozen prizes here and they would be for town of Tecumseh residents. So I think we would work with the resident to make sure that they are transferable again to somebody who has received, it qualifies with the vaccination. So they would have to show their passport as the case may be. But yes, we would certainly want to make sure that the gift was utilized, the prize was utilized.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Tonio.
Just to comment through you, I'd just like to say good job. I like the prizes and thanks for being part of this and initiating this with the City of Windsor. So good job.
All right, thanks, Councillor Tonio. So you're prepared to move the report? Moved by Councillor Tonio, Councillor Houston supports. No further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. Okay, move on to corporate services, and our clerk, the Director of Corporate Services, will present a report and recommendation for council's consideration. And that's the call for the 2022 award nominations. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is that time of year where we present to you the call for nominations for our 3 community awards. One being the Dr. Henry Breaux Community Excellence Awards, the Donnie Massenger Memorial Volunteer Award, and the Youth and Senior of the Year Awards. So we will be putting out calls for nominations. You will recall that we made some tweaks to the awards policy last year and the applications to help streamline the process, as well as to put in place an evaluation criteria. We will be advertising the call for nominations on our social media and in local newspapers, as local media, as well as reaching out to our community groups and user groups to encourage nomination submissions this year prior to the deadline date of October 31st. And as always, the second meeting in November, there is a special meeting held by the members of council to evaluate and give consideration to the nominations that are received. So we're looking for a motion to receive this evening's report on the call for 2021 award nominations and confirming the scheduling of the special meeting of November 23rd at 6 o'clock to consider those award nominations.
Moved by Council Tonio. Support by Council Jobin. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Yeah, go ahead, Council Tonio.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry.
No problem. I don't know if we have or haven't done it, Ms. Moy, but can we reach out like the Optimist Club, the soccer, baseball? Okay,
Do
good.
that.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay, no further questions. Ms. Evans? Oh, okay. I just saw your square light up. I'm thinking I'm on Hollywood Square game. If no further questions or comments, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. All right, the advisory and statutory committees call for 2022 applications. Again, Ms. Moy, want to bring your report forward?
Yes, thank you again, Your Worship. So this time of year, we are normally filling vacancies in a non-election year to any of our boards or committees whereby we've had resignations over the prior year. So since last fall, we have had 2 resignations from our business improvement area. And in the meantime, we did appoint 2 members of council to assist in filling those vacancies pending filling. And as of recently, as of today, we had a 3rd resignation, and that comes from the BIA board chair due to other personal commitments at this time. And she submitted her resignation at this time in order to allow for council to fill her vacancy more expeditiously as well. So we have 3 vacancies on the BIA Board of Management, and we have received 1 vacancy or resignation on the town's Heritage Committee. So this report this evening is to advise council on the vacancies, to advise that we will be calling for nominations or applications to fill the vacancies on these committees, and that the applications would be held at the November 23rd special meeting of council at the same time as the awards.
Okay.
So we're looking for a motion to receive.
Yep. Any questions or comments? If not, moved by Council Jobin, Council Tonio supports. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on. Also, the next meeting is from also our Director of Corporate Services and Clerks, and we'll present a report and motion for council's consideration. And it's on the noise bylaw amendments. So, Madam Clerk.
Thank you again. So I have a report before you this evening that I'd like to acknowledge the work of our university intern, Rami Farag, who helped assist with this report this evening. This report is in relation to the town's noise bylaw. So in November of 2020, the province introduced amendments to the Municipal Act through the Bill 215 Main Street Recovery Act to support the recovery of economic recovery of main streets and to ensure that their important goods can continue to be delivered to businesses and communities efficiently and effectively. And so as of September 19, 2021 onwards, municipalities will not be able to regulate noise related to the delivery of goods to retail business establishments, restaurants, hotels and motels, and goods distribution facilities. So we took a review of our noise bylaw to ensure that our bylaw was not inconsistent with these new regulations once it comes into effect, actually later this week on September 19th. And we are making recommendation that an exemption be provided in the noise bylaw so as not to contravene this new provision in the Municipal Act, and that we would not be regulating the noise emanating from the delivery of the 4 categories that I just mentioned. And we are also suggesting too, as we went and reviewed through the noise bylaw, that incorporating in that noise bylaw would be the authorization and direction given to council at the September 8th meeting of council providing authorization to administration to grant exemptions to the noise bylaw until 11:30 p.m. And we also are suggesting a small housekeeping amendment to the noise bylaw to authorize bylaw enforcement officers to assist in enforcing the bylaw where necessary. So we're looking for council's receipt of this report and to consider favorable consideration to the adoption of an amending bylaw on this evening's agenda, number 2021-67 to the noise bylaw.
All right, council's pleasure. Councilor Tonio, move the report. Councilor Altenhoff, support. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any of that is carried. Thank you. All right, move on to financial services. And it's the year-end variance report. And so I'll ask Mr. Kitsos to bring that report forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report, as you mentioned, is our 2020 year-end budget variance report. We ask that the recommendation is that council receive this report that reflects a tax-supported surplus of $1.73 million and a rate-supported surplus of just under $412,000. And also includes recommendations that those surpluses be transferred to the following reserves, that $516,000 be transferred to the operating fund surplus be transferred to the tax rate stabilization reserve. So that includes $493,000 specific or provision for 2021 financial pressures associated with COVID-19, and a $23,000 carry forward request specific to 2020, specific to 2020 approved and unspent operating budget funds towards our 20th anniversary of amalgamation and town hall artwork reframing. That $255,000 of the operating fund surplus be transferred to our sick and vacation pay reserve. And that's based on our actuarial update just completed for 2020. That $854,306 of the operating fund surplus be transferred to our infrastructure reserve. And that our $112,755 capital fund surplus be transferred to the infrastructure reserve. And further, that our rate supported surplus, so those supporting water and wastewater services, be transferred as follows. So $315,851 of water operating fund surplus to the water rate stabilization reserve, and $96,089 wastewater operating fund surplus to the wastewater rate stabilization reserve fund. And so I can a brief description of the report. So this, of course, is our wrap up of our 2020 year end financial. So as we're all aware, we operated for the bulk of 2020 under a local state of emergency, and that was enacted back in March. Notwithstanding the operational and financial challenges of the dual state of emergency, the town did continue to provide essential services for its residents. Some non-essential services were stopped or reduced in an effort to help reduce the spread of COVID-19 and to contain costs in an effort to reduce the financial burden to Tecumseh taxpayers. So as we recall that this occurred back in March, news of senior government financial assistance, of course, did not arrive until late July and early August. So cost containment measures were implemented quickly and effectively immediately following the declaration of the state of emergency. The town's cost containment measures combined with senior government financial support, and that's by way of the Safe Restart Agreement, enabled us to provide for an appropriate transfer to reserve that we think can be used against COVID-19 financial pressures in 2021, and that's reflected in our recommendation. So while the pandemic and the threat of inland flooding were forefront for most of 2020, the town was able to continue with some healthy development, and we had some strong building permit activity, which helped build our surplus as well. So the town ended 2020 with an operating surplus for both tax support and rate supported programs of $1.625 million and $412,000 respectively. And despite the significant surplus, of course, caution is necessary as the pandemic continues into 2021 and will have a significant impact to municipal operations. Back in October, we had presented the August variance report and projection to year end. So back then we had estimated an operating year end surplus of 1.326 million. So generally we tend to be a little on the conservative side, and we generally would expect to exceed our projections from August. However, this year, the surplus was some $500,000 greater than we had projected. So we do identify in our comments section the main drivers for that increase to the surplus at year end. And just to highlight a few of them, so permit revenue was $202,000 greater than we had anticipated or projected back in August. So we had projected to meet budget, but we had a real strong fourth quarter in 2020. We benefited from investment income, so our bank interest and our capital gains. So typically we don't get a capital, we can't budget for a capital gains distribution, but we did get one through our one fund investments. Wages and benefits, we did have extended temporary vacancies and COVID-related cost containment greater than what we had projected of close to $300,000. So overall, those are the major ones. Overall, we had a greater surplus than we had projected of $526,000. In the report, we do identify, we have a section that's specific to COVID and the impact to our budget. So we did that early in 2020, really to identify the impact, as of course we had no real idea how hard the impact would be felt by the municipality. So we did identify our revenue losses at the year end. So we came in with close to $1.2 million in revenue losses, which is quite large for a municipality our size. So arena rental was down close to 40% at $311,000. You'll see I won't go through the whole list, but there's quite a few large ones. The penalty and interest, that refers to our penalty and interest for tax arrears, and that was a financial relief measure extended by the municipality, and that was a cost of $192,000. The outdoor pool not opening is $138,000 in revenue we would typically see. And I'd also like to highlight provincial offenses, fines. Generally, we would expect to collect around $100,000. So a lot of their activities were reduced or suspended for the bulk of the year, so that our revenues were less than $20,000. So all in all, a shortfall of revenue of close to $1.2 million. We also identify some non-budgeted expenditures, and those came in at just under $120,000. So really not as high as we might have expected. And that includes employee redeployment, town hall security. So we had some visitor screening in the last quarter of 2020. We had additional facility custodian services and safety protocols, and janitorial and PPE and barriers installed at the town. So that amounted to around $120,000. Now our cost containment measures offset the bulk of those expenditures or loss of revenues. So we were able to contain costs through our own measures of close to $1.1 million. And that's primarily through wages and benefits, and a lot of that is through the reduction or the cancellation of certain programs where the bulk of the employees would be either students or part-time employees.
Sir, Grant, I just want to jump in there, the cost containment, like the primary, like the students part-time and the students. Wasn't there an offset though from federal dollars that paid 100%?
Yes, and so you'll see that actually lower in the table.
Okay, I'm ahead of
See that. So we did through our cost containment measures, which we implemented immediately. A lot of that was through like recreation programs and things and parks programs where we would hire a lot of students. Now, grant funding was announced later in the year and it really came like in July and August. So we were able to benefit from that program, and we did hire a lot of students, and we did get close to 100% financial support. It was 100% up to a certain wage. And so you'll see in the table below, we show some grant funding or financial assistance that we did receive. And so we did recognize SRA transit stream phase 1 revenue of $22,000. So we were allocated close to $34,000. So we've deferred a portion to 2021. The SRA municipal stream phase 1 was $554,000, which we fully recognized in 2020 to offset our revenue losses. And SRA municipal phase 2 was actually announced in late December. And that was $234,000. We've deferred that to 2021. And then you'll see, as you had mentioned, student grants. So through federal grant program, we received $124,000 that offset almost 100% of some student payroll costs. So the net COVID impact, as we calculate it here, is around $493,000 contribution to our surplus. So although it's a surplus, we do recognize, and it is understood by the senior levels of government, that any surplus would be transferred to reserves to help offset future financial burdens. So we do anticipate, and we obviously are experiencing financial pressures in 2021 directly related to COVID. And so that is why we're recommending that $493,000 be transferred to the tax rate stabilization reserve. So then we also like to mention that although those are the dollar impacts to COVID, there are a lot of there's other significant impacts from COVID that are hard to put a number to. And so that's really the reduction of services in general. So and that's through additional hours to complete tasks or safety protocols such as 1 person per vehicle. So it would take longer to do certain programs during the year. There's training and travel time for employees who are redeployed. And there's time and resources invested in COVID-19 planning and response at the expense of budgeted programs and service delivery. So very hard to calculate a dollar amount. It would be huge, to say the least. I think we did an estimate back in our August variance, and for a 1 month or 6 week period, we calculated around $150,000. So it would be quite significant if we put a dollar value to it. Nonetheless, it doesn't hit the budget because it's not paid. So that's kind of off the books, I guess. It's at the expense of other services and program delivery. As far as regular operations, so we calculate that the tax supported surplus net of the COVID impact is a surplus of $1.132 million. So in the report, we do have a table that identifies the major contributors to the operating. So I won't go through them all, but I will say that we do have some common ones as we have typically run surplus the last several years. We do typically get some surplus through wages and benefits, and that's through either temporary vacancies or salary gapping, and that contributed close to $500,000 this year. We had assessment growth greater than estimated, so we tend to be conservative here in finance, and so we had assessment growth that was greater by $260,000. Those are some of the, and I would also like to highlight building permit revenue, $208,000 greater than estimated. Utilities, $173,000 lower, so there was reduced rates, reduced consumption. Some of that due to COVID, but some of it is, I guess, indirectly related to COVID, such as gasoline prices. And also, though, there was a negative that hit to our impact, negative that hit our revenue, and that was the Community Safety and Policing Grant Program that we mentioned in the presentation earlier today. So that was announced, and that was retro really to 2019 or 2020 and 2021. So we took that hit all in 2020 of $179,000. So in all, we have that table will list items that will tally up to 1.132 million. And then as far as rate supported goes, as mentioned earlier, the rate supported combined surplus for water and wastewater comes in at just shy of $412,000, which is a large surplus. Some of that, and there's items identified in the table, but again, wages and benefits for temporary vacancies and salary gapping equaled close to $200,000, or almost half of that surplus. User fees were up. So typically in the last many years, we've fallen below budget in user fees. So this year we were able to actually have a surplus in overall user fees of 70,000. Our water purchase cost was below budget by 129,000. That's really a result of our budget. So when our budget was developed, our agreement with Windsor Utilities Commission on the bulk water purchase agreement was not finalized. So really that's just a function of how we budgeted our water purchase, which was based on summer levy, which is no longer a part of the function. So we're able to save some there off budget. And wastewater treatment costs $60,000 below. And that was again from treatment costs at the Little River plant came in less than what we had estimated. So that's a summary of the report and of the year. That was 2020. Are there any questions? We could take them now.
No question, but just a comment, Mr. Kitsos. I mean, no doubt with the hot summer, I know water sales was probably quite high, you know, in that regards. But I think for the general public, when you look at, you know, the surplus and the amount that's there, this is not just that it was we overtaxed people. The COVID played a huge role in this, because if you look at the containment piece in that, is that we've reduced a lot of the services and a lot of our facilities were closed, and the mitigation dollars that came. So it's not through large amounts of, you know, of really big new assessment that came in. And so we have to make sure people understand that, and that's why we're parking those dollars in areas where we're still dealing with a little bit of unknown, you know, whatever happens at the end of this year and how deep this fourth wave is going to be and so forth. So it's really, you know, a combination of things, receiving additional support monies from the province and the feds, and the reduction actually. And that's a reality. We did reduce some services. We maintained the essential ones, which we thought that was critical and important for us. But, you know, especially the recreational side, and that really took a big hit. And so it's to make sure that there's an understanding out there that it's not all of a sudden, you know, we've got all this 1.8 million and it was just, we overtaxed, so we're going to reduce your taxes by 1.8 million. That's not the case. And I think there are going to be some folks that are going to be saying, hey, I want some of that money back and so forth. But I want to make that point very clear, you know, that these are unprecedented times, and there's a whole host of reasons why that's there, and the rationale why those dollars are being put in different buckets, you know, to deal with, again, the uncertainty of what the end of this year is going to be and what the beginning of next year. Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Great work by everybody, right, for us to really, you know, come up to this this number. The only question I have is projecting now for 2021, our mid-year budget variance. When will we expect to see that, you know, come through? And I'm just wondering how things are trending this year with, you know, some of the pandemic pressures.
Through the mayor and to council. So Q2 variance, we are working on that right now. Actually, we are hoping to bring that to council at the next council meeting at the end of September. You know, if we can get it all wrapped up. If not, it would show up in October. But we will try our best to get it for September. Right now, we definitely are seeing in the first half of 2021, we definitely did see a large hit to revenues. Now we do have, as we had identified in the presentation earlier today, we have a little over 700,000 in grant revenue that can be used towards COVID-19 financial impacts. So at this point, our sense is that we anticipate that between the 700,000 and what we have put away in the 493,000, that would certainly be sufficient. But it is very early to tell. It's going to be very hard to project to year end, especially now with we've got a lot of rec programs open, and we know the arenas are open, but we're also hit with wave 4. So really projecting is going to be difficult to year end, and we will obviously be conservative. I think it is good to know that as an organization that we have the ability to react and contain costs if necessary. So I think you can trust that we will do that if the need arises. And I would say, without looking at those numbers for Q2 variance, I would anticipate that we should be okay as far as we should not be running a deficit. I don't anticipate that. But I certainly wouldn't expect a huge surplus either.
No, and if I may, thank you for the context there. And when I read this report, it was 2020 and we're, now September of 2021. So, I was just, thinking in my mind how things were trending, but, thanks for the additional information and, context on, how things are trended so far this year.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to administration. Again, I'll echo the very positive comments on the report. Just following kind of off from what the mayor said, as well as Councillor Houston. We're in a transient here. It's unprecedented times, certainly, and these are all new and unique to us. But please, let's try to keep notes so we can kind of, as hopefully we'll get out of this. We've been all hoping that for many, many months now, but clearly it's not the case. But let's try to keep notes so that we can, smarten up. And I don't mean we're not smart. I think we're doing an awesome job. But let's try to get these numbers perhaps as close as better, because we certainly don't want our residents saying what kind of the mayor indicated, that, hey, that money should come back to us, because, I think what we're trying to do is do the right things here. But if we can just, take those notes, be mindful of things so that in the future we can kind of narrow that gap as best as possible, then certainly our residents, I think, will feel perhaps a bit better. But really appreciate all the efforts with this. And again, these unprecedented times, these are transients that, none of us know what the right thing is to do sometimes. So we proceed with caution, and being conservative is the good thing to do. So I really appreciate your efforts with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments at this stage? If not, then a motion to adopt the report that's been presented by Mr. Kitsos and the delivery of the surplus dollars to the various reserve funds. Moved by Councillor Tonio, supported by Councillor Houston. On the motion, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that motion carries. All right, move on. Again, our Director of Financial Services will present the report, and it's on our 2020 annual report on investment and cash management. Glad you mentioned the one fund.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so our recommendation, this is our annual report on our investments in cash management for 2020. So we're recommending that this report be received for information purposes. So this is a report that we file every year with council. It really is just an update on what our policy states, what we legislatively are allowed to do with investments, and what our policy and our strategy here is at the town. And it does provide an update on the results for the year. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but generally our investments have performed well. We do benefit from a very good relationship with our financial institution, that's WFCU. We also have benefited from the one fund investment, as the mayor mentioned. So we use that for our post employment benefits reserve fund. So that has performed well over the years. And so That's something, and I will say that there are potentially other opportunities through one fund that we have explored some of those opportunities. That's something that we expect to continue to explore this year. But as of now, we use that fund for our post-retirement benefits. And overall, you would see that in the table, our returns have been close to what we use as comparator targets or better than. So overall, we have, in understanding that it is, of course, imperative for us to be conservative and safe and to also have cash available. And of course, we have a lot of large capital projects and big spends that we have on the horizon. So it is obviously very important that we manage our funds carefully and that we do have funds available for the time when it comes to spend those funds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kitsos, on his report. Is there any questions or comments? Councilor Dowie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Kitsos, thank you for making as great a report as you can, speaking about the subject matter. I guess I don't know my investment performance in depth. Like, you know what, I buy mutual funds and I trust that the money management is going well. I could say to learn a lot. I'm hoping I might be able to shed some light on the trends more so than the annuals. And so I see you've got some great comparisons between what could have been versus what happened with our specific investments. So are you noticing as we go through the different calendar years, the ups and downs in some of our investments, or do we just have an off year for some? And I look at, for example, Essex Power. You've compared to the one investment and its performance. Just told me you can elaborate a little bit on that. Whether there's, it's good. I know it's good to have a mix, but are you seeing some trends long term that might warrant some differences going forward?
Through the mayor and to council. So there has been the expectation of rising rates. That's been around for a while. So that has really yet to materialize. And of course, COVID has had a large impact at reducing short-term rates. So we felt that a bit this year. So normally we would earn closer to 3% on our bank income. So the equity market and the equity fund is always difficult to predict. So that definitely has its ups and downs, and it's something that we would limit our participation to our long-term investments. That's something that we would explore if we could do a little bit more of that. As far as our midterm investments, we know that we have very stable ones. Through our investments with Essex Power, they're quite they're good midterm returns. They're consistent and they've been reliable. So they're safe investments for a municipality to have. One thing that we could do is we could possibly explore our mix a bit. And that's something that we hope to do either in the upcoming year or the year following. There is an opportunity now, of course, that we're building some reserves, and especially with large expenditures on the horizon, that we would look to see if we could improve on our returns. So there is an opportunity possibly to explore some opportunities with longer term investments. But that's something obviously we have to limit to our policy, the restrictions of our policy and legislative limitations.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? If not, then a motion to receive the report as presented. Councilor Jobin and Councilor Altenhoff, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. All right, next report, transfer payment agreements for projects and municipal modernization program, intake number 2. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Mr. Kitsos, you're on a roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so this is a short and sweet report. So this is a good news report. We're asking for council's authorization for us, for the town to sign a transfer payment agreement with the province through the Municipal Modernization Program Intake 2 for grant funding for 3 projects in particular. So we did apply to the Intake 2 stream for 3 projects, and we were fortunate to be awarded funding for these 3. And so we have them on the screen there for you. So we received $80,000 towards the Town of Tecumseh Digital Strategy, Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Plan Review, Town of Tecumseh Payroll System Review, and the Town of Tecumseh and Municipality of Lakeshore Economic Development Study. So that's good news. All these projects are either just getting underway or will be soon underway. There is a time frame where we have to complete these projects in order to receive the funding. So originally the deadline for completion was November 30, but that has been extended to the end of January, which was welcome news. So we do anticipate completing those projects in the allotted time frame and earning those grants in full.
Great. Any further questions? Yes, Deputy Mayor Bichetti and Councillor Altenup, I would say keep your comments really short because there's a huge storm coming and I don't want to lose power.
Yeah, I was prepared to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Support.
Happy to second it.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? None. Okay, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Yeah, I don't want to rush you, but I can see it right in my background here. You can probably see through my window. Okay, Parks and Recreation Services are Tecumseh Rec Complex and Arena COVID-19 screening process. Mr. Anthony, or is it Ms. Rice?
Good evening, Mayor McNamara, members of council. I first would like to acknowledge the work of Carrie Rice, the manager of recreation special programs, in putting together this report, as well as the assistance of Brett Palmer receiving and getting some of the background information. Council is aware that on September 1st, 2021, the province initiated and announced that as of 22nd of September, that only fully vaccinated patrons would be allowed in certain facilities, and recreation facilities are one of those facilities that were named. In response to that, administration has put together a package of how we're going to handle those responsibilities. Number 1 will be screening. We've developed through the assistance of IT an individual screening application for the town, the recreation complex arena, which is outlined in the report, the questions that will be answered. It's similar to the town questionnaire that staff fill out, but this is reflective of the arena. So we'll be able to keep the arena patrons records, who's there, and also it'll be name and family. So if the family comes in and there's 4 or 5 of them, just like a restaurant, one will register and that family member then will be responsible to acknowledge who was with them. The second is the verification of vaccination, which is a new process. Individuals entering the arena are to show proof of vaccination along with government ID reflective of 2 doses and at least 14 days from the last date of the 2nd dose. Children who are under the age of 11 and younger are unable to get vaccinations and do not have to show proof. When this report was compiled, the province hadn't given us the new regs, which did come out today finally, and they did acknowledge that individuals or youth under the age of 18 that are participating in a recreation program are now exempt as well. The OMHA, the Ontario Minor Hockey Association, has put in a vaccine mandate for all their members, which doesn't come into effect until October 31st. So we were certainly very glad to see the province move the age to 18. Otherwise, we would have had to been checking every player over the age of 12. A lot of players won't have been vaccinated until their deadline with the OMHA to the 31st of October, which would have created chaos. We're going to have to continue to control the access to the building now reflective of this, because everybody coming in will have to show that proof. There will be lines. The old days of families coming an hour early and the kids coming into the dressing room and being around are no longer there during the COVID-19. They'll have a limited time before the game time to come in and to leave afterwards. So we will have to control the access to make sure that we ensure that everybody coming in is vaccinated. The Parks and Recreation Administration Office is inside the arena. So consequently, because everybody needs to be vaccinated to come into the building, anybody coming to the office will also have to show proof of vaccination. Over the last year through COVID, we've streamlined a lot of our processes, and a lot of the information and business can be done online. We encourage the residents and the patrons to continue to use those and try to, in most cases, not have to come to on site. This brings us to staffing requirements. We certainly don't have the staffing resources to undertake what is going to be required of us to ensure that vaccination passports are passed. We also know that there are going to be issues with residents that come to the door that may have not been vaccinated, or their family members that may not agree with the policy and may try to push the issue. So we are recommending that we have trained security personnel on site with our COVID ambassadors, who would be checking not only the passport, but also ensuring that screening has been done. These additional measures are recommended to be undertaken for the remainder of 2021, after which administration will report back to council to assess ongoing requirements for 2022, reflective of what continues on with the pandemic. Financial implications, we don't have a final figure now. Our estimates are in the $59,000 range, $54,000 for additional staffing, $5,000 for the app. These costs will be covered through the COVID funding that is supplied to the municipality. So the recommendations. It is recommended that Parks and Recreation Report number PRS 2021-13 respecting the Tecumseh Complex and Arena COVID-19 screening process be received, and that administration be directed to implement the COVID-19 screening process as outlined in the Parks and Recreation Report PRS 2021-13 respecting the Tecumseh Recreation Complex and Arena COVID-19 screening process for the remainder of 2021. And further, that the costs associated with staffing the COVID-19 screening process as outlined in the Parks and Recreation Report respecting the Tecumseh Recreation Complex and Arena be funded out of the 2021 COVID-19 recovery funding for municipality program funds allowed to the town and or the town's tax rate stabilization reserve if necessary. I'm open for any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. Any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Dowie.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Oh, shoot, I see the lower hand. Okay, there we go. Thank you for the comprehensive report, Mr. Anthony. And actually, with the change in the regulations, as you cited earlier, I guess, does that make it more challenging or less challenging? Because it's, now we don't have, I guess you've got two different categories of clientele. And how, I guess, is there an easy way to really filter who goes where, or is it everyone comes through the same door and goes through the same screening, except some have to deliver more validity than others?
It's a good question, Councillor Daly, and through the mayor. Yeah, unfortunately, we have to control the access point, because if we were to allow the players to come in one door, you're always going to have individuals that try to come in with them. So it's going to be challenging still. It's a lot better that the under 18. So if somebody's coming in, you can obviously tell who's player. They're either going to be dressed or they have their equipment bag with them. Those individuals will be allowed to be able to go in. It helps us now too. We don't have to check the proof of 12 and under, because all participants now don't have to have a vaccine passport if they're a participant. However, if that same player comes back with his mom and dad on Sunday to watch their brother sister play, then technically we are to ask for their proof of vaccination as well. So we will ask parents not to bring their unvaccinated children back as spectators. And this will include grandparents, parents, whoever comes in with them. We're also going to encourage the players to try to limit the amount of people coming with them. So we limit, the backups at the door. We know people always come late and they're going to be rushed and they're going to be worried because, they may be there almost at game time and there may be 20 people ahead of them in the line. We'll have to go through those processes, but I assure you the next week, we're hoping that those individuals will now realize, okay, we got to be there just a little bit earlier than game time.
Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments? Then a motion to adopt the report by our director, Councillor Jobin and Councillor Tuomey. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Move on to planning and building services, our TTS service, January to June status report. You want to put that up on the screen or you just want to do a verbal? Mr. Jeffrey?
Mr. Mayor, I'll just give a quick overview of the report for council. The TTS ridership levels continue to be below pre-pandemic levels, but appear to be rebounding in the first 6 months of 2021 and have continued to grow in recent weeks. We continue to suspend the collection of the bus fares, and that's to protect both the ridership and the bus drivers during the pandemic. And this has resulted in a revenue shortfall of approximately 11,000 year to date, but that's expected to be fully offset from grant funding allocated through the Safe Restart Agreement or SRA program. Despite the lower ridership during the pandemic, the TTS remains an essential service for many in the community. Should also be noted that work has begun on the on-demand transit pilot program that was authorized by council in July of this year. A number of meetings have been held with Blaze Transit, which is the on-demand transit firm retained by the town, with the goal of launching the on-demand service in December of this year. And updates on its progress will be communicated to council. The recommendations report is that council receive it. Make myself available for any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments to Mr. Jeffrey? Councilor Dowie?
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Chad. Thank you for another good analysis of our transit system. Looking at the trends, I'm thinking that we're not destined to get back to full ridership until basically the restrictions go away, and so that might be quite some time. Now, with the on-demand that approach that's coming, do we at this point, is it too early to say whether there's going to be an uptick in the operating costs inherent with our service, or do we expect it to be neutral? Wondering if you might be able to shed some light.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for that question, Councilor Dowie. I would have agreed that we weren't going to get back to pre-pandemic levels a week ago, but recent conversations with the manager of the first student who operates the bus service for us have indicated that we're getting back to closer to 90 a day in recent weeks, which is fairly close to pre-pandemic. And I don't know if it was just a good couple of weeks or what, but it appears that looking at it optimistically, we are getting back to more normal levels. With respect to the cost, I don't foresee an uptick in the costing of the service when we initiate the on-demand, but it is a bit early to make that claim at this point. We'll know more over the next few weeks as we work with Blaze Transit to establish the service and the parameters with that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments to Mr. Jeffries? If not, a motion to receive his report. Councilor Houston, Councilor Dowie, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. All right, the Community Housing Renewal Strategy, Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative. The town of Tecumseh's participation in 2021 rental housing component. I know Mr. Hillman, you're going to present.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Quite briefly, the town has been involved with this program or a similar form of the program. It seems to change names every few years with different governments coming in since about 2007. And this is a program that provides funding for rental housing. It's capital funding, and it requests two commitments of the municipality so that we can become part of the program. As council will recall, it is managed by Windsor's housing division, and they are our service provider for this region of Ontario. And one of the requirements is that the town commit to a reduction in the municipal tax rate for multi-use residential units. And they are currently set at either equal to the single family rate, or they can be up to 10% higher. That's set by provincial legislation. In our region, our multi-rate for 2021 will be 10% higher. So through this program, if council agrees, we would be viable for applications to come into the program if council agrees to set on a successful project for housing that's supplemented, that they would have a tax rate set for 20 years at the same rate as a single unit. And the second part, Mr. Mayor, is that there's a passage of a municipal housing facility bylaw, which council has passed previously, but it is due to expire. And so we would propose to bring forward a bylaw that is updated. And it is under review right now with our housing partners in the city to confirm that we're meeting all the requirements. So quite briefly, we are recommending to council that we participate in the program and that council pass the recommendation that be confirmed, and also that the mandatory requirements setting the property tax rate for multi-unit receiving grant capital program funding at the effective rate of single residential be supported by council for, and that would be provided as a grant in lieu back. Bylaw would come forward if council supports this at a future meeting for consideration of passage in relation to the housing facility bylaw. And Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Hillman. Any questions or comments to Mr. Hillman at this stage? Well, I mean, that's something that we've been always talking about is, and we've been hearing about affordable housing within our communities and so forth. And if we can incite, developers to come in to get some projects off and running, that's the benefit from it. So I certainly concur with the recommendation that Mr. Hillman is bringing forward. Council Deputy Mayor Becchetti, move the report. Councilor Alton support. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Still with Planning Department, the countywide active transportation system CWATS Town of Tecumseh 2022 proposed project. Mr. Hillman.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. As council will recall, around this time every year, we bring forward potential proposals for funding jointly with the CWATS program. This year, you'll note in the report that we've had 12 successful applications in the past, and the report summarizes those. I won't go through those. We had identified for this year the capital project to be a trail extension along the west side of Manning Road, south of 22. That would coincide with an improvement program that is an interim improvement the county is looking to undertake. It had been anticipated that it would include the closure of the East Town Line drain that would provide a platform to support the facility that is identified in the CWATS plan and in the Manning Road EA document. However, there have been some recent, I would say, complications related to the stormwater issues in that project, and it would seem that the enclosure will not happen. So what we're proposing is that we not bring the application forward. It would seem that it's not going to happen. And what I would remind council is that the balance of our capital projects for CWATS funding are going to be aligned very closely with major enhancement programs that the county will be undertaking on their county road network, primarily Manning Road, as it goes forward south of 22, but more closer to the present will be County Road 42, where it goes through Tecumseh Hamlet. You'll recall from Manning to Banwell Road is going through a complete redesign, and that will have infrastructure. And Banwell Road itself, generally from County Road 42 north to the railway crossing along Tecumseh Hamlet. We will be bringing forward projects for the following year that will align with those construction projects, whether they be trails or bike lanes or whatever. And in addition, you'll recall our last project will be the Manning Road north of St. Gregory's up to Riverside Drive. That includes some infrastructure for active transportation that will be funded through CWATS. It looks like it won't be ready for next year, so that will be another project for 2023. So that's sort of the status of the capital projects. And then very quickly, Mr. Mayor, with respect to the Municipal Partnership Program, which is a program where there's funding for 50-50 funding from the county on the types of operations that entice the use of biking and active transportation. I'd like to thank first Carrie in Parks and Rec, who is really helping with the programming and utilizing that funding that's available to the town. So we have a proposal for a bike camp, a bike rodeo in association with the Tecumseh 100th anniversary, a bike fun glow ride for the 100th anniversary, and bike ballets for the 100th anniversary celebrations and Labor Day weekend. And we're recommending that we seek funding to have those programs run in 2022. And it would result in a town's share being $2,550, and the Municipal Partnership Program would fund the balance. And so this report recommends a receipt of the report and support for the Municipal Partnership Program funds, programs that I had just noted. I'd happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hillman. I do have one question. Is on the CWATS piece, in particular with the Manning Road, and that's clearly opposite to what the environmental assessment on stormwater especially on the Tecumseh side. Obviously, that's where the East Town Line drain is, and alters that. And so is that the rationale? Has there been an amendment to the province from the county? I'm not aware of that yet on the environmental assessment on the new roadworks that are there, because we're also entertaining a new water main as well. I think in somewhere in that easement or between there up to, I think, 50 meters or something like that past Sylvester Drive.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Henderson may want to intervene, but it's my understanding that we have two things going on. One is the environmental assessment that took place, municipal class EA, and that was the permanent solution. And of course, what we're talking about are the interim improvements, but they may be in place for a considerable period of time. So I know that our engineering division is working with the county engineering division and their consultant to resolve the preferred form of stormwater conveyance as a solution. So my role sort of stops there because I'm only interested, well, I'm interested, of course.
Of course you are.
But my interest as it relates to CWATS is, do we have a platform, right, to build some infrastructure? So I noticed Mr. Henderson joined. He might be able to provide a much better explanation on that question.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. There's been substantial discussion between our engineering division and the county engineering with regard to this project. And they are currently looking at an interim solution to avoid having to enclose the East Town Line drain at this time. And they're kind of pushing that solution because of safety concerns they have at the intersection and a number of collisions that have occurred there. A few years ago, they did the we'll call it the first phase of the improvement for the section where you turn and head southerly onto Manning Road. And they're pushing to try and get those improvements implemented to reduce the collisions at that intersection. With regard to the water main, yes, we are proposing to put our water main in as that part of the work progresses. The water main is currently proposed in the roadway. It is a transmission main and doesn't have a lot of services off it. And in the boulevard, there's just too many things. Ultimately, the East Town Line drain would be enclosed following the EA or a future addendum. There has not been an addendum done at this point. But there's gas mains there. There's just a number of things in that intersection, which would make it very challenging to put the water main in the intersection. So that is still the goal, to put the water main in under this current work. And they are investigating this interim solution to try and improve the intersection.
Usually interim solution becomes permanent solutions. And Uh, Well, I guess that's something the deputy mayor and myself will bring up to county, but I mean, we've been waiting a long time to put the proper solution there. And I always been one that there's an EA for a purpose. And whether it's because of foundry sand that was dumped there or whatever the rationale they're thinking, is that it could be 10, 15, 20 years down the road, or how much money are they going to be spending? We've already done some remedial work even after they made the changes on that intersection. And the southern, I know the southern piece itself, that's where the issue really hits. And there's, the stub to the drain is very tight to, to County Road 22. And unless you shift everything on the lakeshore side, which I doubt that's going to happen, I suggest on my behalf, I mean, council can weigh in, but on my position is that you keep negotiating hard. There's an EA that was done, and these interim solutions. We've had a bad record on interim dealing with the county on a lot of that. So I do have some concerns, some real concerns moving forward. Councilor Dowie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd like to echo your concerns. I mean, you engage with the public through environmental assessment to set parameters so the public understands what is going to happen. Then to come forward with plans that don't resemble that, it just doesn't seem to be consistent with an appropriate diligence for public consultation. I'm wondering if we, as a council, can, if there's anything that we can do in our capacity to just get some clarity on why the EA is not being implemented as had been brought forward and approved by county council back in the day.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to you and Councillor Dowie. We certainly appreciate your concerns and share them. And I can tell you that the Director of Public Works and Environmental Services and John have been very strong in their positioning with the county and essentially defending the county approved EA and a permanent solution over any kind of interim measure. So we're still taking that approach, and certainly as you're aware, if we hit the wall, we will come to council, as we have with other county projects, to seek your assistance to advocate to the county.
Yeah. And I'm
it was good.
Yeah, I'm hoping that that's exactly the case, come back to us and so forth. I mean, for me, the interim solutions and then the throwaway costs, I'd like to know what that entails. And a good example of that is when we were working and developing the Riverside Trail, for example, and the rationale why the south was the preferred designation and so forth. And a lot of the concerns that we had as council was the throwaway costs. And we all know there's going to be works that are going to be done on that drive eventually down the road. We get that. But in the meantime, if we were to spend $1.3 million and then just rip it all up in 5, 6, 7 years down the road, to me, that doesn't make any sense. And so that's why, we took the approach there is to say, okay, very limited amount of throwaway will be done on that particular section of a road. So to me, that, we just went with that battle on the 30 meter and the 38 meter needs of the realignments of County Road 43 and 42. And, there was an interim solution, whatever, we'll come back and get the other 8 meters down the road. Well, that doesn't make much sense because of the, again, it's the cost and so forth. So to your point, Councilor Dowie, you're right on the money. There was an EA done. Everybody signed off on it. And now, because maybe the remedial work is a little more costly today, but the reality is it's going to be a heck of a lot more money down the road. And, you know, the whole issue here is safety, moving traffic. I get all that. And what's really important and the disappointment I have, if we're developing the Sylvester lands, I want to have a safe access for cycling and pedestrians. And an open ditch just doesn't cut it for me. And once you get the developments down that particular road, it's going to be that much more difficult. And a good example of that was Green Valley Plaza. I remember when we covered the ditch and who was going to pay for it. And it was a difficult time for those who were on council at that time. So I don't want to belittle this anymore. But I think Mr. Henderson, and I know you guys are there to support the good, you know, the interests of our community in that, and work with the partners and so forth. But I think we need to continue to push the right fix, because the right fix is the EA, and it's now. It's not 5 years or 10 years down the road. I hate punting stuff down the road. So stay tuned, members of council. Administration will come back and so forth. But I think you get a clear understanding, Mr. Henderson, where we're coming from. And to the deputy mayor and myself, well, I guess we'll have to have some conversations with our friends down Highway 3 and to deal with this at the proper time.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and we certainly do appreciate your comments on this. And it, as Mark had mentioned, we have had significant discussions with this and trying to move it towards that EA path.
I appreciate that, and certainly just echo to and pass it on to our director that we're there in his corner, and your corner as well, and yours too, Mr. Hillman. Even though you're not a water main guy, but you're the active transportation guy.
Well, thank you.
All right. Anyway, a motion to approve your report. Moved by Councillor Houston and Councillor Tonio. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. And public, again, planning and, and building services, 2021-44, a request for extension of draft plan for subdivision approval with 1061160 Ontario Inc., known as Santa Rosa Business Park, County of Essex. The application 37-T-17003, northeast corner of the 8th concession, County Road 46 intersection. And Mr. Hillman, I think you'll bring that report forward.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is an application. Thanks, Sean. The subject property is outlined in red, and we'll get to a little technical issue we have to deal with momentarily. If we go to the next exhibit, if we could please, Sean. So this is a property that had gone through a planning process a few years ago, and it did receive draft plan approval from the County of Essex, our approval authority for plans of subdivision. Work had commenced very aggressively between the town and the developer, and working on a subdivision agreement. Draft plan approval happens with conditions. One of the major conditions is that an agreement be executed with the municipality. Sometime thereafter, we were faced with the reality of COVID. And a plan of subdivision typically has an approval period of 3 years, after which the approval lapses. However, the Planning Act does provide for an extension at the request of the owner to the approval authority, who then asks the town what its thoughts are vis-a-vis. It will come through a resolution of council, I hope. This plan of subdivision is about to lapse in December, the draft plan approval. So we would like to see that they have an opportunity to proceed with it. One of the last issues from a servicing perspective that was being worked on was just with in relation to storm matters. We were very close to having an agreement, a subdivision agreement brought forward to council seeking authorization to execute, and then things just slowed down. So we are in support of the extension that's requested. And one minor issue, please, if I could. In the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, you'll note that inadvertently, there's a typo, and the recommendation refers to describing the property as being at the corner of the 8th Concession Road and County Road 42. That should have read 46. But we are recommending support for the extension for the 71-acre parcel of land that you can see is broken into the 7 blocks, 5 of which are for development purposes for business park uses. So if there are any questions, Mr. Mayor, I would be happy to take those.
Thank you. Any questions, members of council? Councilor Jobin.
Nope, just support and move the recommendation.
Thank you. Support. Councilor Altenhoff. The only question, Mr. Hillman, the wooded area in that also, is there a built-in, I would surmise there is a buffer to protect that naturalized area?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Ultimately, where that was left was it will be designated and zoned for natural heritage features, and there will be a conservation easement, I think is where it was left, placed on it. There had been discussions with the Conservation Authority over a potential transfer of ownership that never came into being, but at a minimum, there will be a conservation easement on it. So what you see there today will remain as a standing natural heritage feature after the development proceeds.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments on the motion? All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. All right, Public Works and Environmental Services, Canada Community Revitalization Fund, the CCRF, the Riverside Drive Trail. Is that going to be Mr. Henderson? There he
Yes.
is. Oh, on the other side of the screen. Oh, you moved
Thank
pretty
you, Mayor
quick.
McNamara. As Tom mentioned earlier, funding is a very important part of our work in achieving it and getting it in order for us to achieve our goals. This is another good news report, I'll say. It's related to one of our funding applications. On August 13th of this year, the federal government announced its financial support for the Tecumseh Riverside Drive Trail project through the Canada Community Revitalization Fund. This fund is a national investment of $500 million over the next 2 years, which will build community infrastructure and revitalize existing assets, bring people back to public spaces safely as health measures ease, create jobs, and stimulate local economies. It's a one-time special intake, and it will fund up to 75% of total eligible project costs, up to a maximum of $750,000. An agreement is currently being prepared by Canada, and it will be reviewed by administration and the town solicitor. The final agreement will be brought to council for approval and execution by the means of a bylaw. The Riverside Drive Trail, as most of you are aware, has an estimated cost of $1,239,300. With this grant, $750,000 of that will be covered, and the town's remaining amount will be $489,300. And it's anticipated or expected that that would come from the Infrastructure Reserve Fund for $451,800, and the Storm Sewer Life Cycle Reserve for $37,500. So with that, the recommendation in the report is that a bylaw be prepared to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign a contribution agreement between Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Canada, as represented by the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, or Canada, and the Corporation of the Town of Tecumseh, referred to as the town, in a form satisfactory to the town solicitor, financial content satisfactory to the town's chief financial officer, and technical content satisfactory to the town's engineer, for a grant under the Canada Community Revitalization Fund for the project that includes the installation of a recreational multi-use trail on the south side of Riverside Drive from the Tecumseh-Windsor border to the Manning Road, or otherwise known as the Riverside Drive Trail Project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henderson. Any questions or comments? Then a motion to approve the grant. Councilor Houston and Councilor Tonio. Questions or comments? On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. All right, Madam Clerk, I think we finally come back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a few bylaws on the agenda this evening. The first is bylaw number 2021-63. This is an amending bylaw to the BIA board appointments on a temporary basis, pending permanent filling of the vacancies with the 2 members of council on an interim basis. We also have bylaw number 64, which authorizes the funding agreement with the federal government in regards to the DMAF funding. Bylaw 65 authorizes the site plan control agreement with the TDL group previously reported on. Bylaw number 66 is an amending zoning bylaw for 5648 North Talbot Road, also previously reported on. Bylaw number 67 is a bylaw to amend the emission of sounds bylaw as reported on earlier this evening. Bylaws 68, 69, and 70 authorize signing the transfer payment agreements in respect to the intake to municipal modernization funds as also earlier reported on this evening. And then finally, we have bylaw number 71, which is an amendment to the traffic bylaw to permit on-street parking on Tecumseh Road between Bedell Street and Shawnee. We're respectfully asking for first and second readings of these bylaws and if appropriate, third and final. And with the third and final, we also have bylaws number 41 and 42 to give final approvals to the CYR or the Sear drain and the South Talbot drain respectively.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. On 2 readings, do I have a motion? Councilor Houston, Councilor Tonio on 2, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And then third and final reading are in order for all bylaws. Deputy Mayor Burketti and Councilor Houston. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Unfinished business, members of council. None. New business. Is there any new business at this time? Councilor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to council. I'm just wondering, we certainly are seeing, certainly over the past, very recent times, as we've experienced ourselves as a municipality, kind of the implementation of mandatory vaccination requirements. I'm just wondering, we're the leaders of the community, and I look out, and you're seeing, certainly we've implemented a mandatory vaccination policy. The province has kind of required many other, what I'll refer to as kind of constituents of the very large composite body we are, to implement similar things. One thing that I think is missing, and unfortunately it's quite large, is our schools. And I'm just wondering, can we send a kind message of encouragement for them to consider mandatory vaccinations? I know, I know there's issues, but the science, the data, it's showing where we need to go. And I just think this would be perhaps a good thing to encourage, this very significant entity, which, would benefit our community.
That's a good question, Ted. That's the $68,000 question, but they fall under the Education Act, and I certainly want to commend the university, and I want to commend St. Clair College, where they fall under a different jurisdiction. But those are jurisdictions that, under the Education Act, the Ministry of Education, we are under municipal affairs and so forth. We're another body. I mean, I wish them well. I hope, I wish they would take the measures, but again, they have an elected body. They're called trustees, and it's left up to them in terms of doing what they think is the right thing for their responsibilities.
I agree with you on that, Mr. Mayor. Just, again, what I'm suggesting is perhaps a kind message of encouragement to look at that, because, unless we take, at the root of it, I'm an engineer. And when you have a problem, you look at the issues, which can be kind of creeping issues into the problem. And I'm just trying to recommend, a mechanism or some form of encouragement to try to assist with potentially eliminating a source of the issue. That's my means for this. If it's council's wishes just to kind of leave it as status quo, I'll accept that. But it's really something that I've been thinking about. And again, as the leaders of the community, I don't think it hurts to bring forth just a kind message of encouragement to consider that.
Well, the other aspect I think we can look at as well, Councillor Altenhoff as well, is sometimes you lead by example. And the municipal sector is, in my opinion, are leading by example. And I can tell you that it hasn't been lost on a medical officer of health. He's been, really advocating that, they take that particular initiative. And I understand the difficulties too, because the under 12 can't be vaccinated, as we know yet, and certainly the school boards and they have the authority over the hiring of their faculty and so forth. But again, they're a different elected body, just like the province, and deal with their folks, and then the federal government, and which the federal government did put in mandates for federal employees. The province did it with provincial employees, but that one there is the big question mark. And look, I feel for that. I have grandkids that are under the age of 12, and others that are above that age, and we all have that concern, and so forth. But I believe that the trustees have to make that decision, and if the province, I don't know if they can or not. I mean, that's not my purview. I don't know enough of the Education Act and under that ministry what their powers really are. But the boards, they have the power over their employees, which is the teachers, and they're guided by elected officials, the trustees. And for us, I think I'd leave it to their good wisdom and hope they figure it out. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, and through you to Councillor Altenhoff. Do I think vaccinations within the schools will help? Absolutely, right? But I do believe for us to send a letter of encouragement, a resolution, is outside of the scope and the boundary of what we do here. So will it help? Absolutely. But I think it's just outside of our scope and outside of our boundary to do something like that. And we can lead in the community. I did see Windsor, their council all stepped up and they put in and came out in public of what their vaccination status is. And I know we've here in Tecumseh have to submit all that information, and we've asked of our staff and all the members who are attending any of our facilities. So I'm fully vaccinated. I certainly support everybody getting vaccinated, but that ask for me is kind of outside the scope and boundary of what we do here. So.
Okay. Any further new business? Deputy Mayor Bichetti.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quickly, just want to, on behalf of all of us, wish our Councillor Dowie, it's one of his last meetings as a bachelor.
You stole my thunder.
Oh, sorry, Mayor.
That's okay.
I'll turn it over to you, but.
No, you go ahead. No, go
We
ahead.
want to wish him all the best this week. At the end of the week, he's getting married, and wish himself and Mary all the best in the future.
Yeah, we'll certainly echo that to everybody. So we wish you a wonderful day, and I'm sure it will be. And we certainly want to offer our best to you and Mary for a wonderful life together. And again, life, happiness, and health. That's we wish you all the best.
Thank you very, very much. I certainly appreciate the kind words.
Okay, no further new business than a confirmatory bylaw, 3 readings to confirm the proceedings of our meeting this evening. Councilor Tonio, Councilor Houston. 3 readings, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Any notices of motion? None. Our next meeting, members of council, will be Tuesday, September 28th. It'll begin at 6:15, a quarter revision on the sewer drain, and 7 p.m. a regular council meeting will occur. If there's no further business to be dealt with this evening, then adjournment is certainly in order. Councilor Tonio, move and have support. Councilor Houston. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you very much. And with that, members of council, administration, and those streaming from the comforts of home, thank you for your indulgence this evening. A lot of business tonight, and looking forward to our next meeting. And in the meantime, stay safe and enjoy what's left of the evening. I bid you good night.